Welcome everybody to an RPG tutorial series where we're going to be making something that looks sort of like this, using Unity. So let's get started right away. The first thing we're going to need to go do is go to this link and download this pack, which has sprites and it also has music that we'll be using. So I'm going to go ahead and download, and yeah, just click right there. And then you'll see that there's a small zip file that will be downloaded for you. And while that's downloading, we can actually get started by opening up Unity. So hopefully you have Unity installed by now, and what we can go ahead and do is create a new project, and we can set it to 2D. So I'm going to be using Unity 2020.1.2 F1 if you want to know the specifics, but as long as you have a relatively new version of Unity, you should be completely fine. And I'm going to call this RPG for YouTube, and just go ahead and click create. So it'll start loading up, and we can go ahead and see that our download is now finished. So I'm going to just put that on my main page for now, and pretty soon here we're going to find a good spot to put it. So Unity is just trying to get loaded right now, so I'm going to go ahead and unzip this while we wait. Okay, so it's now unzipped, and Unity is probably still going to take a while, so I can just open this up and we can go in here and see what we have. So first of all, if you click on the characters folder, you can go and then you can see that we have Gabe, Hat Guy, Manny, Sensei, and Vendor. But you can see that only Gabe really has sort of an animation for us to use. So he's going to be set up as the main character that you can play as you can see right here. There's a few different frames, and this is a sprite sheet as it's called, so that we can go through each of these images to make it look like he's running. Other than that, we also have some mobs that we'll work with, and yeah, just some other nice things such as the music that I mentioned before. Well, my Unity finally opened up now, so what we can go ahead and do is right off the bat we can make a new folder and call it game assets. So the reason that we want to have this is we want to have a specific place that we can actually put all of this. Right now it's just on my desktop, but we're going to want to add this. So let's go ahead and also create what I'll call RPG generic folder right here. And I'm going to create another folder and call it music. So we want a place to put our music, which is separate from everything else, and we can do that by going inside the music folder, and then I put the RPG generic folder in there, and then we can just copy over all of the files, which should be loaded in. It might take a little while because, well, these are music files which are a little bit larger, but once that's done, we can go ahead and add all of our sprites. So we want to go back to, and then we want to create a folder and call it sprites. I'm going to exit out of that and then reopen and go in here, and we can see that we actually want the UI, the tiles, props and decorations, mobs, and characters. So all of these things we're going to want, but first I just want to create the RPG generic folder again, so that we can keep organized if we add more sprites in the future. Okay, so by clicking there, you can see that they're all getting loaded in now. And once that is finished, we can actually go ahead and delete these folders that are on the home page because they are already in Unity's file system now. Okay, so I just clicked delete so we can open this up all the way, and let's go ahead and work on the scene. So you can see right here that the scene is just called sample scene, but I want to right click and rename it to forest 1. This is going to be the first forest level, which we will get to in the future. for now it's not going to have too much. As you can see right here, we have a main camera, and oh yeah, by the way, this is the view of your scene right here. So you can see that we just have a main camera here, and this is where we can actually view what's in our scene, and you can see there's nothing. There's just the main camera. So if I go and click play right here, let's see what happens. Yeah, it's just a blue screen, which means that there's nothing except a blue background that's set up for the camera. Now what I want to do is I want to create a scripts folder, because when we go and write code, we're going to want to have some specific scripts. Also, we're going to want to have, another folder for objects, because basically everything in Unity is set up as an object. I think to get started with, we can create our first object. So let's create something called the hero. Alright, now the first thing I want to do is go and find Gabe's running animation. Or it says idle, but it looks like he's running. And I can just drag this into the screen here, and what that does is it automatically creates a new game object for us right here. And if I zoom in, you can see the different frames. But what we can actually go ahead and do is click on this, and you can see over here there's going to be some settings that we're going to need to change. So what I want to do is I want to change this from bilinear to point. When I click on that, look at that. You can see how much sharper the image looks. Because we're working with pixel art here, we want to use point as our filter mode. And then our sprite mode, it's going to need to be multiple, because there's actually more than one image in this PNG file that we have. So then you can go ahead and click Sprite Editor, and what that will do is open up this view. And then we can go ahead and click Slice, and we can change this to Grid by Cell Count. And you can see this brings up a new menu. So what this is doing is right now this is all just one sprite, but we can split it up into different columns. If I do 5 or 6, you can see when I click here that it splits it up. And all we have to do is make it visually match. So right there, when I click 7, you can see that these are now all separate images, and then we can click apply. Now if I close out of this, I need to zoom out here, and since we made some changes, we're going to need to delete that object and then reinsert the object here. And then what we have to do is actually save the animation for this. So since it's switching between these images, it's going to cycle through them as an animation. And we can just name this as Gabe Idle Run Anim. It doesn't matter too much for now what we name it. We can go ahead and clean it up in the future, but for now I just want to name it something simple like that. And now what we can do is make a few changes to Gabe. We can increase the size of him so it's something more noticeable on the screen. And if I click on play, let's see what happens. So you can see right there that he's running, and it already looks pretty nice. The next thing that I want to do is rename this object to hero, because we're just going to call our main character as a hero in this game. So in order to continue on with that, I'm going to resize him back to 1 and 1, which is really small. But what we can do is we can click on the camera, and we can also drag that down too. So let me see exactly what we need to change the camera to. Yeah, so we need to change it to about this size, which is really small. So 0.799 or something like that. It doesn't have to be exact, and we can change it in the future. So now if I click play, you can see that it's a pretty good size for this screen right here. So in an RPG, we're going to want to have lots of room to be able to see the world around you and not have the character super large on the screen, but also not too small. And since we're working with 16 by 16 pixels, which is pretty small, we're going to want to make sure the camera is a good size for that, which we already did. Next up, what we need to do is we need to go back to our objects and then our hero folder. and we can drag this object, the hero object, into this folder, and you can see that this now changes blue. So the reason that this is happening is because now the hero is a prefab. And what that means is this object is just an object that exists in this scene. But when you drag it over here and it turns blue, that turns it into a prefab, which means I can now drag this hero into a new scene, which is very important because, of course, we want to have the main character in every level of our game probably. So yeah, that blue color indicates that fact for us. Now, we just have a few more things to finish up with. Next up, inside the scripts folder, I want to also create a hero folder again. And let's open that up. Inside here, we can actually create our first C# script. And I'm going to call this hero controller. Okay. So now I'm opening that up, and we can go ahead and hopefully that opens up for you. I don't know, you might be using a different IDE than me. I'm using Visual Studio Code with some special changes to make it look like more colorful and everything, but it really doesn't matter what you use. So for now, I'm just going to delete all this and go through it when we get to it. So first off, what we need to do is we need to type private sprite renderer, SR. So if you're new to coding, what I'm doing right here is I'm trying to access the sprite renderer. So on the object here, hero, you can see that we have what's called a component here that says sprite renderer. And what that means is this game object is made up of different components like transform, sprite renderer, animator, and the sprite renderer obviously shows you the sprite onto the screen. If I disable this, there's no sprite anymore. And I re-enable it, you can see the sprite is back. And when we're using code, we have to access it separately. So by typing that, I'm saving the sprite renderer to a variable. However, it will still be empty. And next, this whole script is going to be for having the character move around the screen. So what I can do is I can make a float move speed and set that equal to 6. So this float is just a type of number. It's a number that has decimals in it, so it's a floating point value. I won't get into the specifics, but if you just want a specific number, you can type int for integer, and then you can have float to have a more specific value, such as like 6.0 or 6.1, but we'll just keep it at 6 for now. And then I'm going to make void awake. You can see here it added some extra stuff. We don't have to worry about that right now. But what happens inside this, which is called a function, by the way, if you don't know, is that right when this game loads up and the character loads up, the awake function will automatically be called by Unity. And when that happens, we actually need to get the sprite renderer. So I'm going to do get component sprite renderer like that. You have to use these carets, and I won't get into the specific reason right now, but yeah. Then void update, and what we can do here is add in some more code. So first we want the horizontal input, and Unity already has some built-in input managers that we're using. So then all we have to do is just type input.getAxis. So we want the horizontal axis for the horizontal movement, of course. And we can copy that and paste it for the vertical. Okay. Vertical, just like that. And then we want to set it up so that we use these inputs and then we actually move the character. So in order to move, you have to create a vector 3, and this vector 3 is going to be made up of 3 different parts. First of all, the horizontal input, then the vertical input, and then just 0, because we're just working with 2 dimensions, not 3 dimensions. And then I can multiply it by the move speed, and then also multiply it by delta time. So the reason that we want this time.delta time is because when your game is running, it's running through different frames, and those frames don't always come out exactly the same. If you're playing a video game, sometimes it's at 60 frames, sometimes at 50 frames maybe, and this fixes the issue of what would happen is your character would maybe move slow and then move fast and then move slow. Because we're adding this, it's going to move at the same speed all the time. Okay, next all we want to do is make it so we actually flip the character around depending on if they're running to the left or if they're running to the right. So that's why we wanted to include this sprite renderer. So let's see if horizontal input is greater than 0. If it is, then we can actually use the flip x function and set that equal to false, or the flip x variable or attribute in this case. Else, if horizontal input is less than 0, we can do flip x equals true. All right, awesome. We've just made our first script here, and if you have any questions on it, you can just write a comment down below. And what we need to do now is exit out, make sure it's saved. I'm going to press Control S to make sure everything's saved. And then I'm going to drag this script over here onto the hero over here in the inspector window. And once I do that, you can see the script is now added. Then if I go ahead and press play, let's see what happens. I'm going to click on the arrows, and you can see that our character can move all around. All right, looking pretty good. However, I want to just go in and maybe change one thing. Maybe let's move the move speed down to 4. I'll just press Control S again to save that, and then we can run it again to see how that worked out. Okay, now you can see the character moves a little bit slower. Not much, but a little bit. And that's how you can go about going through and seeing what works for your character in your game. All right, the last thing that we're going to need to go ahead and do is actually insert some tiles into this game. So we now have a character that can run around, but there's nothing going on in the background. So to do that, let's right click over here in the hierarchy. So this is inside the scene, if you can remember from before, and then click 2D object and then tile map. You can see it automatically creates a grid and a tile map here, and you can see there's the outlines of the different grids right here, and we want to change the grid size to something more reasonable for this game. So actually the values I'm going to use are 0.16 is about right for this game. And then we can go to the tile map and then rename it to background, and then Control C, Control V, and then make this one collidable. So we won't do anything with collidable yet, but to put it simply, it's just going to be when you insert a tile and you want the character to run into it and not be able to go through it. For the background, of course, the character should just be able to walk over it, so it'll be for things like grass. All right. Now we have a little bit more work to do, where we actually need to go back and we need to find the tiles here. So this part's going to take a little bit more time since all of these tiles are actually individual. What we have to do is we have to go through and control click on all of them, which will take a little bit of time. And I'll just do them by this large of a group for now. And we want to change them all to point no filter and click apply. Okay, that was done for the first row. Now let's go ahead and do it for the next 2 rows. All right, point no filter and click apply. And now there's a few more rows left. Again, usually it's really nice if you can have all of these in one image together, which you can actually do that yourself, but I'm just going to go through the extra work of doing it this way. Okay. So now what we can do is go ahead and click create, and then somewhere here we're going to need to insert the actual, what's it called, the actual palette for all of these. So, oh yeah, and this is going to require you to download something from the package manager. So if you go and click on your package manager, what you're going to need to have installed somewhere on here is the 2D tile map editor. So to do that, you're just going to go to package manager and then make sure that this is installed so that you can work on the tiles and tile palettes and everything like that. And then if you have that, then you can go to Window, 2D, and then Tile Palette. And then a tile palette will come up. And you can just drag this over here. And then have a new one where you name it RPG Generic. And then, yeah, like I said, you just drag each of these in like that. And then it'll ask you to save it. And yeah, that's what you need to do. But you can see these are out of order, so I am not going to fix that right now, but I'm just going to demonstrate how you can place these in. Oh, whoops. So you can see there's an edit mode, which if you make a mistake, you can click on it and then you can erase one of these tiles. Otherwise, you want the edit mode turned off, so then you can actually select a tile, and then when you go back onto the scene, you can actually place the tile. So now we can actually start to make a scene that looks sort of nice. And I can go ahead and just place these like so, and just start to build a little bit of a scene for us. All right. Anyway, you can see here that the hero is actually above, or I mean, is actually below the tiles that are appearing. So in order to fix that, we can just set the Z position to -1 on the hero for now, and I'll click save. And then if I go ahead and click play, let's see what happens. So you can see all the tiles are here, and our character is able to run on top of these different tiles. So that started off with a really good start for us. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned a lot about making an RPG.